Welcome to 2 Cents We See Scary Movies, the podcast where we dive into horror films one theme at a time. Each month, we pick a theme, and every movie we review fits within that theme, sometimes perfectly, and sometimes, well, we do our best. I'm Talon, the one who would absolutely go skinny dipping in a haunted lake, but only after giving a dramatic monologue about how this is exactly how horror movies start. And my co-host is Dan, who, if he ever saw his own dead body floating in the water, would just sigh and say, well, this is gonna ruin my weekend. Who's up for a horror movie? This month, we're covering horror movies with lakes, or at least that was the idea. But Lake Mungo barely has a lake in it. And honestly, I don't even think it really fits in the horror genre the way we usually think about horror movies. Very little horror, but a whole lot of yawns. As you can tell by my opening, I had a certain feeling about this movie. I know it's in the horror genre, but I don't know if I've ever practically fallen asleep during a movie. And it makes me want to give props to June 9th.
You fell asleep on it?
Almost. Near the end of it, I was doing everything I could to keep my eyes open. I watched this movie at 8 o'clock this morning. Well, I watched part of it yesterday, but then I started again this morning. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd had plenty of sleep, and I was... I was barely making it. I was like, oh my God, I can barely keep my eyes open. And after it was open, I was like, thank God. And I literally, not kidding, took a 2-hour nap. I was exhausted.
Oh my God.
But this, like I was saying though, this movie makes me give props to June 9th, because even though June 9th wasn't great, it did not make me want to fall asleep by the end of the movie.
And it was horror.
Yeah, there was
in a traditional sense.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because this one was just, whew, first of all, it was super slow. It just took forever to get anywhere, and then when it did get somewhere, it really wasn't anywhere.
It was more like a whodunit sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like a drama, more than it was a horror.
Yeah, I would definitely say it was more like a drama than a horror movie, absolutely. Because I just didn't feel like it had anything to do with horror at all. Not only was it not remotely scary, and it's touted as a psychological horror, but I still don't think it was that much of a psychological horror or any horror and that I could think of. There are twists in there that I thought were very easily detectable early on.
Yeah. Which
I'll get into as I'm describing the movie. It definitely wasn't my favorite movie ever. That's for sure.
No, I have seen it before, and I keep seeing it, like, because I belong to, like, a couple found footage groups on Facebook and some horror groups and stuff, and, like, a lot of people are like, oh my God, like, this is, like, one of my top 10 favorites and whatever. I'm like, I can't remember it being like that for me. And so when I went into it, I'm like, yeah, I can see why I didn't like it.
Yeah. And of course, this is filmed in a documentary style, and I must still try to go through it scene by scene, but it makes it a little weird because it kind of goes back and forth a lot between a whole bunch of people that really don't matter in this movie at all. They're just kind of there as a documentary would have people talking about the people that the movie's about. I do feel that there were some themes that I'll get into, not horror themes, but just other themes, if we were talking about drama sense. And I don't know if they were intentional or not, but this is kind of the best I could do with it. I don't know if it was just me trying to find something or what. So, all right. So this is Lake Mungo. It's a 2008 Australian psychological horror film written and directed by Joel Anderson. The film features Talia Zucker as Alice Palmer, Rosie Traynor as June Palmer, David Pledger as Russell Palmer, and Martin Sharp as Matthew Palmer. There are some other people in there. I just didn't bother getting their names. These are the main characters. It was filmed in various locations in Victoria, Australia, including Ararat and Mildura. The movie has an IMDb rating of 6.3 out of 10.
Yeah, a little high.
Yeah, a lot high. So... or they were high, maybe. I mean, they were
fair. Very fair.
So it opens up with Alice's death. She drowns while swimming with her family, which I'm pretty sure was not at Lake Mungo, right? It was like a river.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Yeah. And there was a dam there. And I think one lady called it the Weir or something like that. Search teams come to where they are and they spend a lot of time searching. And again, didn't seem like a very big body of water, but maybe it was because it took them a really long time to find her. It got late and got dark, and they ultimately sent the family home. And some friends came over to be with them. June's parents came to be with them. They talk about this weird relationship she kind of has with her mom. Doesn't really mean anything in the movie. Absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah. We start seeing some interviews with all these different people, friends, grandparents, the boyfriend of Alice. I do think that this is kind of where because I feel like the movie is more about grief and dealing with the ghosts of grief, maybe. Not that there wasn't an actual ghost in here, but I
Right.
feel it was more like the ghost of grief and the memories that you have. And I'll get into it more
Right.
later on.
Like proverbial grief.
Right. Yeah. This is where I kind of see the grief kind of starting in and how they're dealing with it, because the interviewer asks the father if there was anything in particular that he remembers from that night. And he said, well, I remember the porch light was on. In fact, it's still on. It's been on ever since. And the interviewer asked, why is that? And the father took a second and then he said, just in case she comes back, which is a very common thing, I think, with people who have lost, especially a child. Like they'll leave the bedroom exactly the same. They never change anything. They never move, stuff like that. And that just leaving that light on even some time later, much later, just in case she comes home.
And it keeps that connection open.
Right. And as I'll talk about throughout the film a little more about the grief part of it and why I feel like there's a lot of elements there having to do with grief and dealing with the ghosts or the memories that are left behind. Next, we see the rescue team has found Alice's body and they immediately call the family, and the mother and father go to the dam. The mother, June, stays in the car, and the father, Russell, goes out to identify the body. And he believes that it was a mistake that June stayed in the car because later on it affects her in a certain way, but it ultimately just doesn't give her any closure. But she said that she just was incapable of going and doing that and looking at the body. So he identifies her. Then some days later, they have a funeral. People are talking about Alice and what she was like. Another lady talks about how hard it was for the Palmers at that time, but that it only got worse. You're back at the house. You find out that strange things are going on. The movie starts playing with the idea of whether Alice's presence is still in the house. There's noises on the roof. There's noises outside the window, noises from Alice's room. The mom, June, starts to talk to the documentary interviewer about how she started having nightmares, and they got so bad that she didn't even want to sleep anymore. So she would just go for long walks in the middle of the night. And she made reference to the fact that sometimes she would just go into other people's houses in the middle of the night. Okay.
Yeah, that's safe.
Yeah, because she wanted to be in their life for a while. And I'm thinking, of course, at this time, I'm thinking, well, that's crazy. But then later on, there's another part that we'll get to, of course. And I'm thinking, when I saw that part, I was like, she's mad about somebody being in her house when she was going to people's houses in the middle of the night. What? I don't know, because I'll get to that part later, but she does get mad at somebody else for coming in her house when she didn't know that they were there.
Well, I think for her, when she was doing it, it was just kind of a way to disassociate from her family. And
Right.
just kind of escape from all the madness and just pretend to be in someone else's family for a short time.
Right. Then from there, she goes on to describe this nightmare that she's been having. And it's a recurring nightmare where she sees Alice coming into the house and walking down the hall, and she's still dripping wet from being down at the dam. And then she comes into the bedroom and stands at the foot of their bed, and she just stands there. June said it was terrifying, got to the point where, again, it was so terrifying, it was so recurring that she couldn't sleep, and that's what made her go for walks and all that stuff. Russell goes on to tell a story about how he had been up late one night eating a snack and he heard a noise from Alice's room. So he walked in there and he found himself just sitting down. And then all of a sudden, Alice appears, walks over to her desk, sharpens pencils, looks at her phone like she's checking for texts. And he said he didn't know exactly what happened, if he maybe moved the bed or he squeaked his shoes, but all of a sudden she became very rigid. And then she turned and looked at him and stared at him for what he said felt like forever. And then she came at him yelling, "Get out, get out, get out." So he got up really quickly and left and went back to the kitchen. Sometime later, June said that she found him in there sobbing. So now we move on to the brother, Matthew, and he suddenly has they show him like at the doctor's office, and he's got all these weird bruises all over his body, and they don't know where they came from. They run all these tests to make sure he didn't have any diseases or wasn't poisoned, but they couldn't find any reason for these bruises that seemed to spontaneously show up. And within a few weeks, they just disappeared. They never mentioned the bruises again.
That's true. They didn't.
No, he never has them again.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, I've seen this before whenever you talk about, paranormal activity, not the movies, but movies about paranormal activity where ghosts can beat you up, I guess.
Like a
especially when you're
poltergeist.
sleeping. So this was just some kind of like ghostly trope, I guess, that they just had to throw in there, but they never ever revisit it in any way.
Yeah, there's no follow-up.
Right. So then this is one of the things that I thought was, as soon as they started talking about this, I was like, oh, okay, I see where they're going with this one. We get into Matthew's love of photography, and he's always had an interest in photography, and he went to work for some guy in town that was a photographer. Then they start talking about all these pictures he'd been taking and videos that he had been taking. There was this one picture that he was taking every 3 months for like the past 4 years. And it was in the same spot in the backyard. And he'd been doing this for 4 years. But on this particular time, which was like somewhere time around April, and this is after, of course, Alice had died. He sees in the picture, he says what looks like a figure of Alice. It's very distinctly Alice. It's not like you can't tell. It's very obvious it's Alice.
It's there. Yep.
Yeah. And so then he starts looking through all of these different pictures, and then he had video footage that he took within the house, and you can see Alice's, either her face or her walking through, or figures of her in all the pictures or in the video. Then they switched to this guy named Bob, who was down by the dam around the same time, actually. It was like April, after, of course, she had died. And he was down at the dam looking at some stuff, and he was taking pictures, and he was showing them to his wife. And his wife noticed that off in the distance, there was a very blurry outline of a person, and it looked like Alice. So, of course, it was brought to the attention of the family. Of course, all the pictures that Matthew was taking and showing them, it really got this picture in particular that Bob had taken got June's hopes up, because June thought, oh, she's still alive. She's just out there lost in the woods. And that when Russell ID'd the body, he must have been mistaken, because he did say it didn't even look like a person anymore. And of course, Russell was like, I knew something that June didn't know. I saw her. I saw her dead body. I know she's dead. I know she isn't alive. And of course, June didn't see the body because she didn't want to go look at it. So now she's so convinced that Alice is alive, and almost basically convinces Russell that he may have been mistaken. So they go ahead and they have her body exhumed to make sure it's her, and it is. They find out it actually is her. After all of this happens, we get introduced to the psychic. His name is Ray something. June hears him on the radio, decides that she wants to book a session with him. And he basically, when they're talking, just, what we see of this interview or this session is he tells her to close her eyes, and he walks her through this exercise in which he wants her to be standing outside the house, looking at the house, and tell him what she sees, and then go into the house and tell him what she sees. So she's standing outside the house in her thought with her eyes closed, and she's looking at the house. And first she's just like, well, it's a white house. Then she talks about going inside, and she's walking down the hallway, and she goes to Alice's room. The door is open. She steps inside. She looks around, and she sees Alice sitting in a wicker chair at the end of her bed, and she's sad. Alice is sad.
Right.
So that was pretty much it of that session, but she decides to bring the psychic home to meet the family, because that's what you do. You always bring the psychic home.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the best way to get a good reading, right?
Always, always.
Meet the family, get to the house.
Right. He meets the family. Everybody likes him. A couple weeks later, they decide to hold a seance where nothing happens. So they think. Nothing happens at this seance whatsoever. But of course, Matthew was filming the seance, and when he goes back to review the footage the next day, he sees an image of Alice in the footage. So he then shows the family. Once they realize that this really starts to sink in for him, that for them, that she is in the house, her ghost is there. And then they decide to put up permanent cameras that would run 24/7. And that video, of course, caught many images of Alice's ghost in the house. And then the father goes on to say how the family felt about this, and it made them very hopeful and I wouldn't say excited, but it gave them something to hold on to, basically.
Yeah, like she's still there.
Right. But he said, even though we found this footage and we saw that her in there, we didn't really have time to process it because then the Withers video came out. Now, the Withers were a couple who happened to be at the dam the same day and time that Bob was at the dam. And Bob was the guy that had taken the picture where they thought they saw Alice in it. As they were reviewing their video they took while they were there, they noticed someone in the video and they realized it was Matthew, and Matthew was wearing his sister's jacket. They don't really say why Matthew was there. They talked to Matthew a little later, and he said that he saw Bob or a man up on the hill, didn't want to get in a photograph, being a photograph, so he was walking away from that, didn't realize there was a couple over there that was also filming with a camera and that he got caught in that camera. But they never really explained why he was there and why he was wearing his sister's jacket. So this brings us to what I'm going to guess is maybe the first twist of the movie, if you want to call it a twist.
Right.
I think it's kind of meant to be a twist, sort of, but it's a very, very minor twist. When this happens and the Withers video comes out, Russell, the dad, asks Matthew if he was involved in anything else. And Matthew decided he didn't want to lie to his dad. So he revealed that he faked all the ghost photos, which I knew was going to come. I found that very predictable because as soon as the moment they mentioned that he had a love for photography, I thought, oh, he's going to fake the paranormal evidence and set it up. They're going to set it up so that it was all faked. So I wasn't surprised by that at all. It was not a big shocking moment.
No, not really.
Yeah. And he says he wasn't trying to fool anyone or try to get any attention or trick people in any way. He did it because his mother was struggling so much with Alice's death and he wanted to give her some kind of comfort, even if it was false. He wasn't doing it maliciously, I guess. It was an act of trying to make his mom feel better and give her something to be hopeful for or maybe hold on to in a way.
Right. Like good intentions, but poor execution.
Right. Of course, they talked to the mom about it and she said that it's not that she doesn't believe his reasoning behind it, but she says that it's like she doesn't fully believe it. She thinks there might be other reasons, but she didn't really go into what that would be. But this ended up being a huge downer for everybody, especially for the mom, because it was kind of giving her hope that her daughter was still around, even if it wasn't physically, she was there spiritually. But now they find out that it was all fake. It was just kind of a bummer. After all this, Matthew then goes on this trip with Psychic Ray. And
Psychic Ray.
So they leave, and when they leave, they also leave the cameras up and the cameras are going, but they're completely out of town. They went on some tour or something. I guess Psychic Ray was doing a tour and going out and whatever, and Matthew went with him. So while they're gone, of course, the cameras are still up and running, but the only two people in the house are the parents, and they decided to review the footage. And they can't go and do the same stuff that Matthew did. They can't doctor the footage the way he did. They don't know anything about it. So when they're looking at the footage, they see Alice's ghost and they realize that she really is there as a ghost, which I also figured was going to happen.
Yeah.
That was going to be the next thing.
Yeah, that was a little predictable as well.
Yeah. Then this was not predictable. So when, of course, Alice's mom, June, once they see she's in these videos that no one has doctored, they then go back to look at other footage to see if maybe there are other images of Alice that weren't doctored in these other video footage that Matthew had taken. And so as they're looking for it, they realize there is someone else in one of the videos that...
And he's really there this time.
Well, it's a man. It's the neighbor. So she realizes it's the neighbor. She's really mad that the neighbor's in her house, which is what I was talking about earlier when she was going into people's houses. She's mad because her neighbor's in her house. You could see that he was in Alice's bedroom rummaging through some stuff. So she goes to Alice's bedroom to try to figure out what he's looking for. She finds Alice's small little safe that she had hidden in the fireplace. She gets it open. And there's a bunch of stuff in there. And one of those things is a videotape. And on this videotape is Alice and the neighbors the husband and wife, who she babysat for. And I'm going to assume she was probably about 12 years old in this video, or somewhere between 12 and 16, because she's 16 when she dies.
Yeah, she was young.
Yeah, and she was babysitting for them. It's a video of them engaging in very inappropriate activities with her.
Now, I thought that I heard some crying in that, so I was wondering if that it was non-consensual.
Well, yeah, that's what because when the actual act of it was going on, she definitely sounded like she was not enjoying it. It did sound like crying. There was a time where there was a point before that part happened where she was wiping around her eyes like she had been crying. But the way that people responded to it when they found out about this video, they acted like she was doing it willingly.
Right.
Which I thought was odd. I was like,
that could go along with the typical stuff that goes on with women who are sexually assaulted, like victim blaming and all that bullshit.
Right. Well, they didn't seem like they weren't shitty about it. Right. But they were like, wow, we didn't know she was doing this. She had her secrets and she kept them secret. Okay. But they made it seem like this was like she was regularly engaged in this, which she may have been, but I don't feel like it was willingly. And regardless, I mean, she was too young. She was a kid.
A couple points here is like, I don't know what Australian law is around consent and all that. I'm assuming it feels like that maybe she stole that tape and the guy was trying to find it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, he was definitely looking for that tape because he was probably afraid that they were going to go through all of her stuff and they were going to find it and they were going to get caught.
Right.
So,
but they seemed more shocked that she was doing it rather than saying, "Hey, the neighbor did this to my daughter." You know, that it didn't make much sense to me. I think I'd be more upset with the neighbor.
Yeah, well, the parents themselves were mad because the father said if I saw him, I would throttle him, and the mom was really pissed. The mom was really pissed off. It was more the other people, like friends of the family and her friends, her school friends.
And her boyfriend.
Yeah, we're so nonchalant about it. Like it was, whatever. Yeah, the boyfriend was like, well, I thought we were tight, but, thought we were good. But he was not upset or bothered by the fact that this happened to his girlfriend.
Right.
It was weird. The police were going to try and get them, but it was revealed that shortly after her death, they actually sold their house and moved. And I guess they just moved off the continent because they couldn't find them anywhere. Maybe they changed their names, witness protection. I don't know. This part was another thing that was never brought up again. And I don't really know necessarily 100% why it was even in here. You could have made this movie without that part, unless, of course, you just wanted the sex scene like every movie does. But it just felt like a total detour. It was a very shocking reveal. I was not expecting it at all.
Yeah.
But it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it didn't happen.
No. One thing I did think maybe, and this is, again, maybe I'm just trying to pull anything I can out of this movie, is that they put it in there because it's part of Alice's unfinished business. And a lot of times you will see where they say, ghosts hang around because they have this unfinished business. So they have this stuff that they want to try and fix or make right or do whatever. So maybe because this was a huge secret in her life and she never told anyone about it, that maybe in some way she wanted this to come out after she died. And so it was some sort of unfinished business that she hadn't taken care of. I don't know. It just seemed like a pointless. It was almost like it felt like it was there for shock value.
Yeah. And as far as the unfinished business thing, it felt kind of anticlimactic because, like you said, they moved and they couldn't be found. What did that really solve? Nothing, really, nothing. Other than exposing it.
Right, it did nothing. Then we go back to the psychic. So after the mom finds the videotape in Alice's room, she also found some other items in that safe along with those. One of the things she found was a business card for the psychic, the same psychic they'd seen. And this is when June realizes that Psychic Ray had actually met Alice before family did. Now they feel like he betrayed them, acted like he didn't know her at all when he actually had met with her.
Maybe it was psychic HIPAA.
What would that stand for? I feel like the last letter could at least be apparitions. But okay, so he did say, though, that he didn't feel like he should tell them about it because she wanted their sessions to be confident. And he felt even after her death, he should have maintained that confidentiality because apparently psychic HIPAA.
Right.
So in this meeting with Alice, it was very much the same as with June. He had her close her eyes and look at the house and walk through the house and describe to him what she sees. They don't really show you at this point what she says. So after the family talks about the betrayal that they felt from the psychic ray, the mom is then reading an entry from Alice's diary. And in this entry, Alice is describing this dream that she had that was nightmarish dream for her. And in the dream, she felt cold and wet and her body felt very heavy. And even when she woke up, that sensation didn't go away. So she was very fearful and frightened and decided that she needed to talk to her mom. So she walked down the hall to her parents' bedroom and stood at the foot of their bed. While standing there and looking at them, she was overcome by this intense sadness that then turned to incredible fear. And she realized there was nothing her parents could do for her anymore. And she felt utterly alone. Now, two things for this scene. This goes back to her mom, because earlier in the movie, the mom talks about how her dream was where Alice would come into the room and stand at the end of the bed and just look at them. And that was the recurring dream her mom was having. So they were both kind of having this parallel moment. I kind of like that because this happens again later on. I like it. I felt like I don't know. I felt like there needed to be more. There just needed to be something else, because it kind of has that build up like it could lead to something, but it just doesn't. But the other thing that this also does is, which I think is one of the biggest ideas in the movie outside of the grief issue, is Alice knew she was going to die before it happened. All of these things kept coming up in her life that pinpointed to her imminent death and that it was inevitable and she couldn't do anything about it.
Well, and Psychic Ray probably told her about it too.
Yeah, you would think Psychic Ray would tell her, but the film never really gives us a reason for this. They never really tell us why she is having these feelings or she's seeing these things. Nothing. We get no explanation for it whatsoever. The mom is still looking through the stuff, and there's a calendar there, and which is where she found the business card for Psychic Ray. But then as she flips the page, it also shows the words Lake Mungo written across 3 lines of the calendar, which is when Alice and her classmates went on a class trip to Lake Mungo. So that's where we go next, is Lake Mungo, which doesn't look like a lake to me. It looks like the desert. Like there's no lake at Lake Mungo.
Well, little fun fact on that. It's a real place in Australia, and it's actually a dry lake.
Very dry. Wow.
Yeah, it's a dry lake. And they found 2 bodies buried there from like 40,000 years ago.
That's cool. Well, that explains that then. That's because I was like, there's no lake at Lake Mungo. So she goes on this school trip to Lake Mungo. And when she comes home, her mom asked her how it was. She said it was good. But her mom did notice that she came home without her phone, without her favorite bracelet, and without her watch, but didn't really think anything of it. She just figured she lost it out there and didn't really think twice about it. This is when Alice's boyfriend decides that he needs to show the family, or her parents at least, some of the video footage that was taken on the cell phones by some of the girls that were there with her at Lake Mungo. In this video footage, they're, dancing around a bonfire and all this stuff. But at one point, Alice kind of goes off on her own. It's really dark, so you can't really see it, but I couldn't see it at least. They said that she was under a tree burying something. When the family sees this video footage and they realize that she buried something out there, they all decide that they're going to go to Lake Mungo to see if they can find it. I don't know how big Lake Mungo is, but I feel like it's quite a shot in the dark to try and find this thing she buried. And they do look for it in the dark because during the day they didn't want to bother other tourists. So they went out in the nighttime to go look for whatever she buried. So they go out. They fortunately do find it. And they go back to their cabin they're staying in. They charge the phone. They look at the video on the phone. They realize what she saw. And this is probably the footage on Alice's phone is probably the quote unquote scariest moment in the movie, maybe, sort of. But basically, while Alice was out there at Lake Mungo, she was also recording with her phone different things. At one point, she was looking out in the distance. She could see something walking towards her. And as it got closer and closer to her, she realized it was her, but she was dead, and it was exactly how she looked when her dad looked at her when they pulled her out of the water. So she got this premonition, or there was some sort of spiritual parallel thing going on where she could see her dead body. And at that moment, she knew at some point soon she was going to die. As kind of a ritualistic thing, she decided to bury her phone, her bracelet, and her watch. I'm not sure the significance of that necessarily, but I don't know. Do you have any idea?
No, maybe like just burying the past, or who knows? I mean, I'm just shooting in the dark.
So the family realizes that this is what happened to her. Then the next scenes you basically see, I mean, there's some things in between there where people are talking about ghosts and if they believe in them and stuff like that. The next biggest scene is where they show footage where Psychic Ray is talking to June during her first psychic session with him, as well as when he's talking to Alice in her psychic session with him. And again, he had asked them both to do the same thing about the house, where they close their eyes, they look at the house, they walk through the house, what they see. I do like the way they did this. This is again another parallel with the mother and the daughter, where when the mom walks in, as I said in the beginning, she walks into the house, she walks in the hall, the door is open to Alice's bedroom, she walks inside. But the only thing is, in the first part, she said she saw Alice sitting in the wicker chair. But in this version, she says she walks into the room, and then you cut to Alice telling her version, and Alice says, I'm inside my room in the house. Someone else is in the house. I hear footsteps coming down the hallway, which of course is June. And then I'm sitting there and my mom comes in the room, but I feel like she can't see me. She's not saying anything to me. She's kind of looking around, but it's like she doesn't know I'm there. I thought it was weird in the first part when the mom is describing where she is in the house and that she's in the room, that she sees her sitting in the wicker chair, where in the second part, she says that she doesn't see anyone in there. So the mom also, when she looks in, she doesn't see anybody. When Alice sees her mom and sees that her mom is looking around like she doesn't even see her, it's because she can't. So I don't know why they did that way. I'm not sure. Do you have any ideas?
No.
Yeah, it was like I don't know if that was just a mistake, but that part didn't flow. But I did like that they tried to make it so that those two things were going on at the same time.
Yeah.
And those were just thoughts. It wasn't a dream or anything like that. Those were just how they described their experience when they were with the psychic looking at the house. All right, so basically we're coming to the end of the movie. And this part I thought was really kind of sad. I don't know if it was meant to be scary because it didn't come off scary to me at all. But basically, in the final moments of the show, the family has decided they're going to move out of the house and that it's probably the best way for them to get a fresh start. And even though, of course, they love Alice and they will always love her and remember her, they feel they need to move on. And in order to do that, they have to leave the house because of all the memories that are there of Alice and all of that. They're showing all of these pictures, and there's this one picture where the mom and the dad and the brother are standing outside the house, and it looks like it's probably right before they're leaving. And then it starts zooming in on the window, and in the window, you can see her figure in the window. And I felt like it was more of a sad moment than anything else. It definitely wasn't scary, but it was sad to me because I feel like I was saying in the beginning, this movie's I feel like a lot of it's about feeling grief and maybe some guilt, and that when they're reflecting on the grief and the memories that are quote unquote ghosts, when they're not, I mean, not saying that there really wasn't a ghost there, but that more or less the memories of her were more of the ghost than the ghost itself. Yeah. So, of course, they had to move to try to get away from that, not to forget her, but just to move on. In that picture, it was kind of sad to me because the family's leaving, but of course, Alice is stuck there. Her memories and all of that are there, right, and she's still in the house. So I kind of thought that was a little bit sad. Definitely wasn't scary, though. But that's basically the end of the movie. And I will say that this is, again, another movie where I think I liked the stuff that they put in the credits more than the actual movie itself, because they went back and they showed all the pictures that Matthew took that he doctored to make it look like Alice's ghost was in the pictures. But then upon a closer examination of the photo, you could actually see the real ghost of Alice in a different part of the picture. Yeah. And they show you that. And which I liked that. I figured that there was something with, not necessarily that they were going to put her ghost in the picture was going to be a twist, but that she was going to be a ghost, even though Matthew had faked the pictures. But I did like that they did go back and actually show that she was already in the pictures. You didn't even have to put her in there. So,
Which,
what a waste of time.
as a photographer, I'm surprised he didn't find.
Right. That's what I thought. I was like, how was he not? Because you would think that he's like looking at it and trying to find a good spot. How did he not notice that before? I thought that too. Or even the parents. Because I would have thought that maybe they would have really looked hard at the picture. But I guess when you see it so plainly, because he did put it in there very plain, like it was obvious that this is a ghost, quote unquote. It wasn't even remotely, maybe it's a ghost. It was distinctly there she was. So I guess when you're looking at it like that, you're not going to look for anything else as the parents, but
Right.
he definitely should have.
Yeah, he definitely should have picked up on it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically it. I knew this was going to be a faster one because there wasn't a whole lot to it, because there was a lot of just extra stuff in there for padding that wasn't necessary. Even some of the stuff I talked about, I didn't feel was necessary for the movie, but whatever. So what are your thoughts on the movie?
This one was tough because, like we said in the beginning, like it really wasn't a horror movie. It was more sad than anything else.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see that in our interaction on it, because usually we have, like the last few weeks, we had a bunch of jokes. We had a few on this one, but it wasn't like the other ones. So, I mean, it wasn't even as fun as a regular horror movie. It just had a very dark, depressing, and just very monotone feel to it. And it just didn't resonate. I mean, I did like the documentary style, but I felt like it kind of went a little much. Just kind of talking about like the same things over and over again. And I think it would have been better. And I'm sure it was for budgeting reasons if they had more people in, because at the very beginning, I watch a ton of those shows. Fear Thy Neighbor, where it's about neighbors killing each other. And
I love that show.
but as I was watching the beginning of this one, it just felt like it just went on forever about a girl who drowned. Of course, that's a tragic situation, but when you're trying to do like a documentary, there's usually more to it. Even like the initial drowning, they're kind of throwing hints about like there's more to the story.
Right.
But that's not what they did in this one. It wasn't until later they started adding the twists, and the twists weren't really that big of a deal until they get to the tape. But that was like the most interesting thing about the whole movie.
Only because
like,
it was surprising. I thought.
Right,
I was like, where the fuck did this come from?
because it was just like out of left field, and like
Yeah.
it wasn't something that you expected.
Only thing that I think that they did, that I thought they were hinting at one point in time, but then again, didn't go anywhere with it. Because like I was talking about in the beginning, how they had this weird, because they kept hinting at this weird relationship that she and her mom had, that her mom also had with her own mother, that they were too much alike. I thought, oh, are they going to go with something like, because whenever I watch a horror movie or anything like this, I'm always expecting a major twist where you find out what happened didn't quite happen the way you thought it happened, or the way they're trying to make you think it happened. So I thought, well, maybe the brother had killed her, because he in the beginning talks about how they were both in the water together. He comes out of the water because he's cold. She doesn't follow him out. Then later he's like, where's Alice? And then they don't see her. They don't know where she is. So I thought, well, maybe he really killed her. It was him that did it. But then they got to this whole thing where the weirdness between her and her mom. But yeah, at the same time, they made it seem like she and her mom were really close. I don't know. So I thought, well, maybe there's something with the mom. But nope, nothing. It's like if you were looking at a heart rate monitor and everything's like super steady, the same. All of a sudden, there's the tape, the videotape. So whoop, it goes up real high, then it comes down real low again, and then just stays the same. It lacked depth or something. Like it just dragged. And it was funny because after I watched it, I went to IMDb just to see what the rating was. And I looked at reviews, and there were some people that loved this movie. And I was like, what did I miss? I thought I was going to get away with being able to watch it only once, because I was like, I can't get through this a second time. I don't think I can do it. I would have rather watched June 9th the second time. So at least there was something, because like you were saying, even though we didn't like June 9th, it wasn't that great. there were things that we could talk about that were funny. It was at least there was something interesting to some extent going on.
There was some entertainment value to it.
Right. Yeah. As I was writing all my stuff, I was like, son of a bitch, I'm going to have to watch this again. And that's why I was late getting to do this, because I was watching it again and I'd have to pause it and type up what my thoughts or whatever. I was like, oh, fuck. I didn't want to do it again, but I did.
Yeah,
But
don't
yeah,
blame you.
it was just, it lacked a lot. And I was shocked that people liked it. There were a lot of people on there going, I don't know what you guys were watching, because I'm not watching the same movie apparently, because this movie was horrible.
Right, like explain it to me. Like part of the trivia on that, it said that Jordan Peele had said that this was like one of the scariest movies he's ever seen. And that makes me realize why I don't like any of his movies.
He thought this was one of the scariest movies he'd ever seen?
Yes.
This movie,
Yep.
does he watch scary movies?
I don't think so. I can only hope that this was probably supposed to, like, that quote was probably supposed to be like on The Exorcist or something.
Yeah,
But
it was accidentally put there.
It certainly doesn't apply to this, because I don't know anybody who could be like dreadfully scared about this thing.
No, not at all. Like, nothing happened at all whatsoever. Yeah. And it
No,
was
I
funny
mean-
because when I had first started watching it yesterday, I'd started watching it and I'd probably gotten about maybe 30 minutes in or something. And that's when Jameson texted me and I had to go pick her up. On the way back home, and I was like, well, it's like we can go back and finish watching this horribly boring movie I'm watching. And also another thing was, at one point I was like, how much more of this movie do I have left? So I hit the button and there was 37 minutes left. And I was like, what the fuck could they possibly put in 37 minutes that's going to do anything for this movie? And that was literally roughly right. I can't remember if it was right before the videotape or right after the videotape. But everything that they did do, they basically crammed in right at the end. I was just like, oh my God, this movie is, and it was just, I don't know. I don't know how to make it like that movie.
Something funny. I did the same exact thing.
What?
Around
You
that
went to
same
see-
time frame, I went to see how much longer I had. And I saw 37 minutes. I'm like, God damn it.
That's crazy. That's
had to
the
go-
scariest part.
I had to go pick up the kids at that point.
Right.
So I ended up finishing it up because I watched it this morning, and I ended up finishing it up around like between like 8 and 8:30. Yeah, so
Right.
that's when I finished it, and I'm just like, damn.
Yeah. Because I didn't finish it until this morning, and then I ended up watching it again this evening, which sucked. And I was really hoping, though, that maybe if I watched it the second time, I would pick up on something, because that's happened, obviously. That happened in the last movie. I picked up on some stuff that I'd missed and other movies I've watched. And I was like, well, maybe I just missed something.
Like the armpit hair.
Right. The armpit hair. Fantastic. Fantastic. I'm admiring my own armpit hair every time I look at it.
Just trying to see how long you've been out.
Right. But yeah, I didn't miss anything, I don't think, in this one.
No,
I was-
and even if you did, you don't miss it.
Yeah, you don't miss it. So how many cents do you give this movie?
I'm going to give it like 2.5.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That was 2.5.
You know, only because like the concept of her seeing herself coming towards her was kind of cool. Even though it was out of place, the ultimate shock of the videotape,
Right.
you know, so I mean, it had those two things. And I mean, I would say that it wasn't poorly acted.
Right,
I
yeah.
would say the actors did a fairly good job with what they had. Well, I mean, it wasn't enough to save the movies, like to get a higher change count. 2.5 just because of those things.
Yeah, I was going to say 2.5 as well. I liked the parallels they had with the mother and the daughter when they were experiencing certain things. Although I wish they had maintained consistency with the part with the being in the daughter's bedroom. I don't know why that was different. And I did like the part where she saw herself dead. And then of course the videotape, because that was just like out of nowhere and it was very surprising. But I guess if that's it, then that's it, right?
Put a sock on it.
We can definitely put a sock on it. I'll keep growing out my armpit hair.
I'm surprised it didn't grow out just watching this.
Oh my God, no kidding. Holy shit. Felt like years. All right. So that wraps up this episode of 2 Cents We See Scary Movies. We've explored the depths of Lake Mungo, which, let's be honest, was less about the lake and more about lingering emotional trauma and was very sad and somber. But hey, horror comes in many forms. Next week, we're heading to Eden Lake, where the real horror isn't ghosts, it's people. Thanks for listening, and as always, be scared, be prepared, and don't get caught in the dark.